Hi, this is Joel Selvin, and you're listening to Your Morning Coffee, the podcast, with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart, weekly music news for the new music business.
From Glenn Peoples at Billboard, can Spotify maintain its dominance after Daniel Ek's departure as CEO?
And from Steve Knopper for Billboard, AI artists are here. Is it ethical to sign them to record deals?
And an op-ed by Eric Alper. Michael Rapino thinks concert tickets are underpriced. Here's why he might be right.
And from Austin Staubus, on Spotify, not all streams are created equal. Well, there you have it, Jay. Let's talk about all of this stuff. It's episode 270. We're going to start the show right about now.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand!
Your morning coffee is on the air. 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 On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Well, Jay, it is good to see you on this lovely Saturday here in Southern California, brother.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood. You know, we have a lot of great news to get into. A couple of things that came down late, even after the newsletter dropped. One is that Record Store Day, the Black Friday Record Store Day, that's November 28th, of course. They announced some of the titles, and there was a really great piece in Consequences of Sound. And the headline was the 20 must-have releases, for Record Store Day, Black Friday. And it's going to be a good one, another one. Here are some of the artists that you're going to see releases on Record Store Day from: Billie Eilish, Post Malone, Billy Joel, Bruno Mars, Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, Bob Dylan, Spinal Tap, which you and I were just talking about, George Harrison, Chappell Roan, Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, and many, many others. Really excited for Black Friday Record Store Day.
Wow, I can just feel my bank account shrinking.
Yeah.
Look at all those releases. Find record stores and learn more about all the titles on the Record Store Day Black Friday list of special releases coming to stores starting November 28th at, not surprisingly, recordstoreday.com.
Yeah, don't miss it. Before we hit record, we were talking about this Zach Bryan record-setting concert in Michigan. AEG Presents announced that the official attendance for the Zach Bryan's concert at Michigan Stadium in Ann Arbor, that was last weekend, get this, was 112,408, making it the largest ticketed concert ever in the United States.
Yeah, that's insane. The concert broke the mark of 110,905 set by country singer George Strait at Texas A&M's King Field in College Station back in June of 2024. It was the first ever full-scale concert at the home of the Michigan Wolverines, known as the Big House, in its 98-year history. And I was mentioning a friend of mine lives out there, and he said when you go to a football game at this place, it's unbelievable how big it is. It's just massive. And I can't imagine going to a concert there. God,
yeah, congratulations, Zach Bryan. There was a really cool piece by Mandy DeLugdug in Music Business Worldwide, and the headline caught our attention. It was record labels could strike landmark AI music licensing deals within weeks. the Financial Times reports, and we've been following this very closely. So, again, according to the FT, which reported on last Thursday, citing people familiar with the matter, that the companies could each strike deals with AI companies within weeks. And that's in a bid to set a precedent for how AI companies pay for music. This is super important.
Very, very important. According to the Financial Times report, the negotiations center on licensing music for the creation of AI-generated tracks and allowing the music to train large language models. Discussions have reportedly included AI startups 11 Labs, Stability AI, Suno, Udio, and Clay Vision, all the folks we've been talking about.
Yeah, the labels are also negotiating with tech companies, including Google and Spotify, according to that report. We'll be following this one really closely. Our friend Kristin Robinson over at Billboard has a cool new podcast that we talked about last week. And this week she spoke with Elliot Grange, and she wrote a piece about it as well. And the headline was Elliot Grange talks first year as CEO of Atlantic. Good music, good songs, good artists are forever. So on this new podcast, it's called On the Record, Atlantic Music Group's CEO, Elliot Grange, he talks about breakthrough hits, staff cuts, digital marketing, and SoundCloud rap.
Right. Well, it's been exactly 1 year and 1 day since Elliot Grange became chairman CEO of the Atlantic Music Group. At the time, it was a move that shocked many in the industry because Grange was just 30 years old, had only a year of experience within the major label system, and was replacing a longtime respected leader in Julie Greenwald, not to mention the fact that his music industry pedigree as the son of one of the industry's most powerful men in Universal Music Group chairman, CEO Lucien Grange, loomed large over him.
Right. 1 year later, his vision for Atlantic, which includes Atlantic Records, 10K Projects, 300 Entertainment, Roadrunner, Fueled by Ramen, it's starting to take shape. And during his tenure, Grange has overseen a series of sizable layoffs and restructures to remake this label in his image. Today's Atlantic is more digitally focused with a smaller staff and a number of 10K top brass installed at the top, including, Zach Friedman as COO, Tony Talamo as general manager. They both served as 10K's co-presidents and also provided the indie with digital marketing services through their own firm that was called Homemade Projects. So here's a little clip from Kristin's interview with Elliot Grange. Let's listen in.
If you could walk me through kind of what your first few days were at Atlantic, if you can think back to a year ago, what were some of the things you immediately thought, okay, I need to reshape this part of the company to be a little bit more in line with what I'm thinking? Can you walk me through what immediate changes you kind of noticed that you wanted to make?
Two things is we had to examine why, to your point earlier, why the Atlantic perhaps had felt a bit tired. Now, I don't think it did, but a lot of people may have felt that way. You had an incredible leader before, formidable character who'd been there for I think almost 2 decades. Incredible success. It was very, very difficult for us to examine not necessarily what the issues were, but how we could build on how good the company was and how we could make it better. And so we had to look at the most important thing about record companies, the artists, or the artists being serviced. And so we had to take some very, very difficult decisions. We had to downsize some of the staff so we could reinvest back into the artists. And so that was really what we were able to do. Very, very, very difficult to do that. We've got some incredible people we had to say goodbye to. If we didn't do that, we wouldn't be able to, as a record label, efficiently allocate our resources to our artist partners as well as we could do. So I think that was something that was very difficult, but something that we had to do.
You can watch or listen to the full episode of On the Record on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts.
Yeah, congratulations, Kristin. That's I think that was episode number 2. She's just killing it. Really good stuff. We have 3 bonus episodes locked and loaded that are coming soon.
Yes, we do.
And they're really, really good. So we're going to drop 1 per week going forward, starting with legendary manager Doc McGee, which is going to drop in a few days. Rio Cariff, who is the co-president of Music's Match. That is super interesting. That's, if you go to Spotify or Apple Music and you see those lyrics, that's where they came from. And then Chris Dallariva, who we've talked about and reported on his newsletter and stories that he's written. Chris has a new book coming out in November called Uncharted Territory. And it is really good. It's really interesting. He takes all of the number 1 hits from like the mid 50s until today, and he's created a playlist so you can sort of follow along, in the book. But he talks about how, the business has changed and how it's gone from, when we first started off in this business, artists didn't write their own songs. Mm-hmm. And then, there came Motown or the British Invasion, and it's really sort of a nice history lesson, but you can follow along with the music. It's really well done. Chris Dallariva.
Very, very clever. Yeah, a lot of great books to start reading, and that's one of them for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting piece from Jess Weatherbed over at The Verge. Spotify now lets you exclude specific songs from your algorithm. So Spotify's algorithm shapes song recommendations and personalizes experience like Wrapped and Blend based on what you listen to and how you listen to it. Playlists could already be excluded, but now users can have more granular control over specific songs, helping to prevent particular earworms from influencing future recommendations.
I think this is really cool that now you can sort of keep those guilty pleasures from ruining your recommendations. Excluding a track will lessen the impact on both past and future streams of that song in your recommendations, so you're just for the moment listening, that playlist doesn't end up skewing your Spotify experience, the company said in an announcement.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Another great piece by Jason Lipschutz over at Billboard. There's no clear front runner for the 2026 Best New Artist Grammy, but who has the best chance? So following 2025, a stacked year where Chappell Roan bested Sabrina Carpenter, Doechii, and more, this year's slate of rising talent is a bit less established, Jay.
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. Expect plenty of jockeying for votes across label groups, considering how 60 years after the Beatles took home the award, it still remains one of the industry's most coveted, signs of rising talent. The Best New Artist is still a pretty strong indicator of future success, says Joe Hadley, global head of music and partnerships at Spotify, which has hosted the Grammy party showcasing the Best New Artist nominees in the recent years.
Right. So Alex Warren, You'll Be All Right, Kid, could be considered a front runner at the 2026 Grammys, especially after winning Best New Artist at the MTV Video Music Awards back in September. Yet he's also competing with recent history. A male artist hasn't won Best New Artist since Chance the Rapper way back in 2017.
Wow.
And in the 21st century, the only other rock-adjacent male-led act to emerge victorious was Bon Iver back in 2012.
Wow. So other artists have had breakthrough hits in recent months. R&B breakout, Leon Thomas, Gigi Perez, with Sailor Song, Lola Young with Messy, Jesse Murph with Blue Strips. So, they hope they can endure long enough to punch their cards to the big dance. I thought that was super interesting.
It was the big dance.
Yeah.
Indeed. Another piece by Steve Bertoni over at Forbes, why Spotify CEO Daniel Ek is stepping down after nearly 2 decades. So Ek, 42, says, I've spent 20 years, nearly my entire adult life, as Spotify's CEO. He says, I'm ready to go from a player to a coach. Spotify has been quietly working on the transition for years. In 2023, Ek promoted Nordstrom and Soderstrom to the roles of co-presidents to expand their power and provide them with more leadership experience. Ek says, I feel now is the time, and I don't want to hold them back. They're more than capable and more than ready to take it on. And in many ways, they are way better at leading this company than I ever was as a combination.
Yeah, meanwhile, Daniel Ek will assume the new role of executive chairman And he says he'll work on long-term strategy and key investments. Quote, our challenge was, how do we get the benefit of their amazing execution but still remain founder-led? He says, I'm going to be involved in the long arc of the company, the big strategy decisions and big capital allocation decisions. But to be brutally clear so that there's no doubt, they're going to run the company and they're the CEOs. They'll make the decisions. And in a moment, we're going to talk about a piece by Glenn Peoples in the Ledger where he digs a little bit deeper in, can Spotify maintain its dominance, after Daniel Ek departs.
Yeah. Well, before we do that, Jay, I say we thank our sponsors. As I always say, we have friends in high places, and we are very lucky.
Yeah, we sure are. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and trends and technologies that are changing, how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It's edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
We love Bands in Town. Over
do.
90 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It is the #1 artist service platform, connecting over 650,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms. And every roughly Saturday, we usually do this on Saturday, I get to hang out with that guy right over there, Jay Gilbert, music industry consultant, curator of the weekly Your Morning Coffee newsletter, and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups, and a noted dog wrangler.
Yes. Oh, my goodness. It's been a morning. And I get to do this show every week with my good friend Mike Etchart, longtime host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music Group. And he told me today about this new book about the Cars that I have to read. I can't wait to do that. And I was telling him about the Peter Wolf book. What's the title of that Cars book?
It's called, it's not in front of me, but I think it's called The Cars Let the Stories Be Told.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading that. Both of us got to see them in their heyday, and they were quite a force of nature back then. Great band.
Yes, it is. Well, Jay, let's start the stories. What do you say?
Yeah, let's jump into
the big stories.
Our first story is from Glenn Peoples from Billboard, and this is from his newsletter, The Ledger, that we highly recommend. The headline is, Can Spotify Maintain Its Dominance After Daniel Ek's Departure as CEO? He writes that when Steve Jobs died in 2011, many people doubted that Apple would continue to flourish under Tim Cook, who was more known for his operational prowess than his Jobs-like ability to envision and launch game-changing products and services. But Cook was clearly well-versed in Apple's culture, and the company hasn't lost a step during his tenure.
So why did people doubt Cook? It wasn't that Cook isn't smart, capable executive, but Jobs was Apple's co-founder, and founders are innovators, public figures, and to varying degrees, business icons. Jobs helped popularize the personal computer in his first outing as Apple's CEO and introduced many game-changing products: the iMac, the iPod, iTunes, the iTunes Store, the iPhone, the iPad. During his second period as CEO.
That's crazy because, if you're a CEO or a founder and you have one home run or two, you're legendary, and you just named off like 8. Apple hasn't skipped a beat under Tim Cook's leadership. They became a services provider, launching Apple TV Plus, Apple Music subscriptions, and numerous other cloud-based services. One might argue that the pace of new hardware product launches has slowed under Cook, but the iPhone is still a must-have device in much of the world, and Apple stock is up more than 1,000% since Jobs passed away.
Wow. And why didn't I invest in Apple? Exactly. Yeah, it's another story. But I didn't think of Apple when Spotify co-founder and CEO Daniel Ek announced he was transitioned to executive chairman and be succeeded by co-CEOs Alex Nordstrom and Gustav Soderstrom, who are currently co-presidents at Spotify. Glenn said, rather, I thought of Netflix, which also named 2 experienced executives to co-CEO roles when its co-founder, and CEO, Reed Hastings, took the role of executive chairman.
Right. Founders, CEOs occupy a special place in the public's imagination. You know, they build companies from nothing, create markets where little to none previously existed, and they introduce disruptive innovations that change entire marketplaces. They also tend to be public figures who are closely associated with their company's brands.
Right, but Glenn says, but as Netflix showed, a company can survive and thrive without its founder, CEO. Spotify can do the same. You can read the article over at Billboard Pro, and like Jay said, we highly recommend you subscribe, and it is free. Another great article from Steve Knopper for Billboard. AI artists are here. Is it ethical to sign them to record deals? Well, following Hollywood Media's multi-million-dollar deal with Zanya Monet, music business players are grappling with the implications.
Yeah, this Monet is that creation of 31-year-old poet Talisha Jones from Olive Branch, Mississippi, whose manager says she writes her own lyrics, but she uses Suno, an AI music service, for other elements of these tracks. That's concerning for major labels, which are suing Suno and the other AI music firm, leading one anyway, Udio, in June of 2024, alleging copyright infringement on what they call an almost unimaginable scale.
Well, Zanya Monet's success, her 5 songs have racked up 17 million U.S. streams and generated an estimated $52,000 over just 2 months, has led to ethical conflicts in the business. Some reps from indie labels who spoke with Billboard say they would never sign an AI artist because they're committed to human creators.
Right. Ryan Schmidt, a Savannah, Georgia-based music lawyer, said there's an ethical component here. If you created your label because you want to promote young, up-and-coming talent and you want to advance music, then AI art might not be right for you. If you are a label who wants to be in business and have the biggest catalog possible and maximize earnings, AI is certainly one avenue to do that.
All right. Terry McBride, the co-founder and longtime CEO of Network Music Group, the Canadian indie label that broke Sarah McLachlan, Paris Paloma, and many others, says he would never have considered entering such a bidding war. Regarding Monet, he says, I believe the author is writing the lyrics and the AI is taking that and putting an AI voice and music to it. That's not going to be a touring entity as we know it, he says. We would not sign that. Even if it did hundreds of millions of streams, we have no interest in that.
Right. And then there was Ben Swanson, the COO of Secretly Group, you know, the Indianapolis indie label, home of Mitski, Phoebe Bridgers, Angel Olsen, and others, has a more nuanced position on this AI artist. He acknowledges AI is a revolutionary tool for music making, comparing it to the way Pro Tools, synthesizers, drum machines once changed music. But he advocates for a compensation system where AI trains its source material on copywritten music created by others.
Right. Well, if you're going to keep talking about this, it's these things are a little gray at the very least, right?
Yeah.
They're in a gray area. So, we'll see how that rolls out. Another interesting piece from Eric Alper. Michael Rapino thinks concert tickets are underpriced. This was a story we covered last week. Eric says, here's why he might be right. So Michael Rapino, the CEO of Live Nation, has reignited one of the music world's most divisive debates. Are concert tickets too cheap, or are they already breaking the bank?
Yeah, Mike, I received a lot of emails this last week by rolling this piece in your morning coffee. But I really feel like, you know, we need to sort of show both sides of how people are thinking here. And I think it's good to have the conversation. So Michael Rapino was speaking at CNBC's Game Plan conference in Los Angeles recently, and he maintains that live music remains underpriced, you know, compared to sports and other entertainment. He said, music has been underappreciated. In sports, I joke it's like a badge of honor to spend $70,000 for a Knicks courtside seat. They beat me up if we charge $800 for Beyonce. So those comments sparked immediate backlash online with fans saying he's out of touch, you know, with financial reality. Still, Rapino's point deserves a closer look. So Eric Alper said, here are 5 reasons why he might actually be right.
Yikes. Okay, so the number one, the resale market shows demand is sky high. So look at StubHub or Ticketmaster's own resale exchange the morning after tickets drop. Prices jump to 2, 3, even 5 times the original value. Fans still buy them. This isn't just anecdotal. Live Nation President Joe Berchtold has said more than $1 billion in annual price arbitrage is siphoned into scalpers' pockets. If the true market value of a Beyonce or Taylor Swift ticket is $800, but the box office price is $200, who's really winning? Not the artist, not the crew, the scalpers do. So Rapino's argument is that raising prices up front would redirect that money back to the music ecosystem instead of the resale Wild West.
So Eric's second point is a concert isn't a seat, it's an experience. Live music is unlike anything else in entertainment. A ticket is a gateway to shared catharsis, the lights, the sound, the sweat, the sing-alongs with 20,000 strangers. Compare that to the $15 movie ticket or the $10 a month streaming subscription. The concert memory lasts years, maybe even decades. In today's experience economy, where people willingly pay a premium for travel, dining, immersive art shows, concerts, and arguably undervalued. When fans drop $200 on a single night of unforgettable energy, they're buying more than music. They're buying history. That's part of Rapino's point. The experience outweighs the price tag.
Well, here's point number 3. Sports already normalize higher spending. So Rapino's most controversial comparison is also his sharpest. Courtside NBA tickets, $10,000 and up. NFL playoff seats, thousands. Baseball luxury boxes, a small fortune, and yet those prices are accepted, even celebrated. They become a badge of status. By contrast, the average concert ticket for the top 100 tours in 2024 was just $130, even after a 30% rise. He says if fans treat live sports as worth splurging on, well, why not music? Both are cultural events. Both offer exclusivity and emotional highs. Rapino's argument is that music, which touches lives on a deeper level, has never demanded the same respect in pricing that sports take for granted.
Right. And Eric's fourth point is that touring costs have skyrocketed. Putting on a tour today is closer to running a Broadway show than a rock gig. The lasers, LED walls, choreography, inflatables, costumes, special effects, crews of hundreds. It all costs millions of dollars. Transportation, insurance, venue rentals, and even fuel add to the expense. Artists from The Weeknd to U2 invest heavily in cutting-edge production to create a once-in-a-lifetime spectacle, yet ticket prices haven't climbed in proportion to those costs. When Rapino says concerts are underpriced, part of what he means is sustainability. To keep these massive productions alive without bankrupting artists and promoters, prices may need to rise to reflect the true cost of what fans are seeing on stage.
Very interesting. Well, his fifth point, higher prices can empower artists. Right now, billions of dollars evaporate into the resale economy. Artists see none of it. By charging closer to market value initially, that money could go where it should, into the pockets of the musicians, songwriters, dancers, roadies, and tech crews who make the shows happen. More revenue also means more room for innovation, bigger ideas, bolder risks, and better pay for everyone behind the scenes. Rapino's case is simple. If fans are already spending the money, it should flow back into the music rather than vanish into scalpers' profits. Raising prices doesn't just help the bottom line, it ensures the long-term health of the live music ecosystem.
Eric goes on to write that, of course, I understand the fans' perspective. Ticket prices have already jumped 30% in just the last year, and many are struggling with inflation, rent, and everyday expenses. For some, concerts are the one escape, and the fear is that higher prices will turn them into a luxury item for the elite. That tension between accessibility and sustainability is exactly where this debate lives. But Rapino's comments force us to confront a tricky reality. Fans are paying either way, whether it's to Ticketmaster, to resellers, or to scalpers. The real question is who should benefit from that money, the scalper on the corner or the artist who pour their lives into the stage?
Wow. Well, that's certainly food for thought, isn't it?
Yeah. And look, I appreciate Eric Alper. We've followed him for years, and, he's a very bright guy, and it has a really interesting take on things. And I thought it was nice to have the other side of this debate, so we can, intelligently talk about it. But thank you, Eric Alper, for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Our last piece is from Austin Staubus. On Spotify, not all streams are created equal. So Spotify's pro rata market share model is largely misunderstood despite their efforts to provide clear messaging via Loud and Clear about how royalties are calculated and paid to rights holders. Often, Spotify is unfairly maligned by independents who cite lower per stream rates, in quotation marks, without a basic understanding of how stream share is calculated. The boos always come from the cheap seats, he says.
Yeah, Austin goes on to write that perhaps even more misunderstood are the factors that influence different royalty rates that are paid by the DSPs to rights holders, which are variable. Not all streams on Spotify are paid the same. While information is scarce, I'll attempt to outline these factors here. So let's start with premium versus ad-supported. Ad-supported being the percentage of your listeners streaming your music from a free account. Premium being the percentage of users listening to your music on a paid account. By paid account, I mean a subscriber on an individual, duo, or family plan. Ad-supported being paid a lower royalty rate compared to a premium subscriber.
Right. So second point, domestic versus international. So domestic, meaning streams located in the U.S., everything else, Southeast Asia, South America, Europe, etc., being international. So streams in the United States are paid on the highest royalty, while a stream in an emerging but growing market like India or Africa are worth much less. Every country carries a different ARPU, that's of course the average revenue per user, which directly impacts the royalty that is paid. A Spotify subscription in India, for example, is 139 rupees a month, which is equivalent to about $1.57 here in the U.S.
Right, and Austin's third point is your distributor's negotiated royalty rate. Jeff Ponchik was the first to raise this point, but each distributor and label negotiates their own rate with Spotify. Yeah, you read that right. Depending on which distributor or label you're in business with directly impacts the royalty you're paid. Most artists don't realize this when selecting a distribution platform and assume they're all the same. Distributing through a DIY like DistroKid would yield a lower royalty in comparison to a major label like Virgin or The Orchard.
Right. So while the above factors aren't exhaustive, there are small royalty differences between premium accounts as well as listening on mobile versus the desktop client that he says I won't get into here. I hope this illustrates in clear terms the factors that can influence royalty rates. As he said, not all streams are created equal.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Thank you,
we talk
Austin.
about a lot of this stuff a lot.
We've covered his stuff in the past, and I've actually had coffee with him at least once, and I find him to be, super bright, and I like his take on these things. And, we talk about Spotify's, per stream rate. Well, there is no per stream rate, right? We talk about this a lot. In the pro rata model, there's a pool of money each month, and it's sort of broken out by market share. And so you can't just say that, Spotify pays this, or Apple Music or whatever, they pay this, per stream rate, because it varies so much month by month. And I thought that Austin did a great job of breaking that down.
He certainly did. Very interesting stuff. All right, time to wrap up the show. We want to thank our sponsors, Hypebot and Bands in Town. Boy, we sure appreciate their participation from the very beginning, some 300 plus episodes back. We sure love those guys over there, and gals, of course. Of course, the music from the Licorice Quartet, and Jay and I would really appreciate it if you enjoy the show. If you tell just one friend, that would totally make our day. So on behalf of my good friend Jay Gilbert, I am Mike Etchart. Thanks for listening in, and we will be back next week on the Your Morning Coffee Podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.